Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining the Matics webinar. My name is Brian Tilley, and I lead our sales and operations for North America out of Denver, Colorado. This is a recorded session today, so we won't be able to take any questions live. However, we have a great guest today, and I've prepared some great questions for the session. Our guest today has made major contributions into manufacturing, including 26 years in the industry as a leading high-end tool supplier, numerous awards and recognitions for his work in bringing back manufacturing jobs to the U.S. He's a recognized expert on onshoring and offshoring manufacturing and has participated in President Obama's insourcing forum in 2012 and was named to the Commerce Department's Investment Advisory Council in August of 2019. He's been highly quoted in the media and has appeared numerous times in business and finance shows about reshoring. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Harry Moser, president of the Reshoring Initiative. Harry, thank you for joining.
Brian, it's great to be here, and everybody out there in the audience, appreciate your interest and the chance to do some reshoring with you.
Very good. Well, at Matics, we try to bring a new capability to manufacturing that hasn't been seen. We tried to bring total visibility and transparency into the organization so that we can see what's happening on the manufacturing floor. We bring a lot of Industry 4.0 or smart manufacturing capabilities to manufacturers in a very approachable software package. And I think that a lot of what happens in reshoring is impacted by the technology that we have and vice versa. So can you first start by telling us a little bit about the Reshoring Initiative and what you do there and how it all started?
Okay, so I started the Reshoring Initiative, a nonprofit organization in 2010, and I had retired from being the president of a big machine tool company, and retired from that, started the Reshoring Initiative, and our mission is to increase U.S. manufacturing by about 40%, bring back 5 million manufacturing jobs, and to, in effect, to balance the goods trade deficit. So that's what we do. We have several ways to do that. We document the trend, we promote it, and we provide tools to help companies decide to reshore.
But it's more about trade deficit, right? I mean, there's something about manufacturing back in the U.S. that appeals to a lot of different people.
Yeah, it doesn't just appeal. I mean, appeal sounds a little like feels good, but it's really essential to the country. If the country is going to stay as the arsenal of democracy, you know, as the leading country in the world or anything close to that, it cannot have its manufacturing continue to decline the way it has.
Okay. Well, when did you start the effort, and were there any metrics or any kind of numbers that you started as a baseline, and what's been the progress over, what's this been, 10, 12 years now since it was started?
Yeah, that's right. So started in 2010, and the best metric is that in that year, the total number of jobs announced to come to the country, the combination of reshoring and FDI, foreign direct investment. So Matics would be an FDI example, okay? So a combination of those two was about 6,000 in that year. And in 2021, that's last year, 260,000 in the year, so an annual rate. And 2022, we're currently projecting 340 or 350,000 jobs announced just in the year, not cumulative, but in the year. So we're 50 times the rate that it was when we started. So now it isn't all us. Obama helped, and Trump helped, and Biden's helping, and you know, others are doing their share of the lifting, but we played an important role.
Are there any verticals or sub-verticals that fit this model better than others? You know, we often hear about automotive and pharmaceuticals and things like that, where we'd like to have them back home for certain reasons. There's drivers for everything, but what kind of verticals are you targeting for reshoring more than others, if there is a priority?
Let me tell you what has come back, and that's easier. It's always easier to be accurate about the past. And so over the 10 years, the transportation equipment category, that NAICS code was by far the best. It was twice anything else, and largely because there was a lot of foreign direct investment that brought some huge, 2,000, 5,000 jobs per factory. Now, 2022 is different with electrical equipment, appliances, and components surging way ahead of transportation equipment. And that's primarily because, for whatever reason, the bureaucrats decided that EV batteries are electrical equipment rather than transportation components. And there's been, I don't know, 10 or 12 huge EV battery factories announced to get the US to be self-sufficient in batteries instead of continuing to be dependent upon especially China or South Korea for the batteries. So batteries, putting batteries in electrical equipment makes that the number one category, followed at the moment by chemicals and transportation equipment, about tied for second, and then computers and electronics, medical equipment and supplies, fabricated metal products. And so the big difference is transportation shifting down to number three, largely because of that definitional issue.
Are there any industries, sub-industries that you think are out of bounds that just will never get back over without significant changes in economics and political landscape?
The toughest has always been apparel. People here generally don't want to make t-shirts, and the product is so labor intense that it's very hard to justify having the product done here. Nevertheless, apparel has brought back tens of thousands of jobs, partially because consumers like the idea of something that's sustainable. They like the idea of something made in the US, the quality, somebody getting a job. And so overall, even apparel has made some moves back. But in general, the products that are hardest to bring back would be those where there's a lot of labor content that you can automate, where the freight cost is low, where the design doesn't change and the demand is very consistent. So you can bring over inventory, and if you don't sell it in August, you're going to sell it in September or October, and the demand is. Whereas if you have something where the demand is very seasonal, then you start to see advantages of producing close to the market or in the market because you can adapt the supply to the demand. Okay? So we have various tables and charts and things that list those primary characteristics that would suggest either bring it back or probably work on something else would be a good idea.
Everyone seems to talk about, the media talks about automotive and bringing automotive jobs back to the US. Has that been successful or making good progress thus far?
Automotive has let's say the US companies have not brought back so many jobs, but the foreign companies, the Toyotas, all of them, Volkswagen, et cetera, have brought back tens of thousands of jobs, or have brought here tens of thousands. So they've chosen to produce here instead of producing there and shipping to here. That's foreign direct investment. So most of it has come from Japanese, German, some Italian, South Korean car companies producing here.
Okay. And, we've been hearing for a long time that the cost competitive nature of offshoring, going to China, going to Mexico, and producing these products, that cost advantage is going away. I've been hearing it for 10 or 15 years that labor differential continues to decline. Is that part of what's triggering this? Is it becoming a tipping point now where it almost makes no sense to offshore?
It depends on the product and the country. So China has unquestionably had 10 up to 15% average annual wage increases expressed in their currency, in the yuan or the renminbi. And so that has made the difference between almost nothing per hour, 50 cents or something an hour, to now they're up to $7 an hour So this could become significant. Um, Other countries typically have not raised their wage rates anywhere near as fast. So it's been more of an impact on China, and China was in fact losing work even prior to COVID, even prior to the Trump tariffs. Work was flowing out and going to Cambodia, Vietnam, India, other places, and some to the U.S. The um, but other countries have not done that as much. And even in China, it's been significantly offset by the fact that the reported, and I'll say reported, Chinese manufacturing productivity increase is about 6 or 7% per year for the last 10, 15 years, whereas in the US, productivity increase has been about half of 1% per year. So about half of that wage increase has been mitigated or eliminated because their productivity has gone up because they've had new factories, new equipment, the ability, whereas we're still typically working with older factories with older equipment. So they've invested heavily because they're booming, and our companies have poured money in, and our people have bought stuff from there. And so they've really done very well. So they haven't lost as much competitiveness as the raw wage data would suggest.
Okay. What about ESG matters, environmental, social governance? I mean, those were a lot of the drivers that we pushed manufacturing to other countries because their rules for compliance and regulatory concerns, environmental, et cetera, were less stringent. And so it made us more cost competitive. Is that starting to catch up with other countries now that is, again, making that no longer a driver?
I've seen companies certainly do their best with ESG, and they work pretty hard at it. I find, though, that they do their best to be, let's say, environmentally compliant at their factory, and they make a little effort to get their supply chain to be compliant, and the effectiveness of that effort declines as you get further and further away and you get further down the tiers of the suppliers. And so US companies want ESG, but they have not come to the conclusion, they have not realized that just by making something in China and shipping it here, as opposed to making it here, you have a dramatically higher environmental impact. We did a study of an aluminum die casting and compared the environmental impact of making it in China, shipping it here versus making it here, and especially because the electricity production in China is much dirtier because they're much more coal intense than we are. As a result of that, the emissions for making it there, shipping it here is 25 to 50% higher than if you just make it here. And aluminum is fairly electricity intense, but other products it's going to be 10, 15, 20%. But the companies have not universally understood that. They locally minimize pollution rather than looking at the entire system and optimizing throughout the entire system. And we call on them to do that. We're revising our total cost of ownership estimator and intend to have a rough calculator of environmental impact based on the different countries that the user is considering sourcing the product from.
Okay, and I know that we've extended basically our ESG concerns and our requirements to some degree through the whole supply chain. So particularly protecting labor, protecting environmental issues. We can't do it completely from the United States, but we can put pressure on that supply chain to be more adherent to ESG concerns.
Yeah, entirely. And if consumers want it, the consumers say they want to buy something that's sustainable. They don't say ESG, they say sustainable, I think, and clean. And yet it's hard. It's hard for the consumer even to find the made in USA product. I'll go into a store to buy something, and I'll say, tell me about your clothing that's made in the US. And they say, well, you got to turn the tags over, and 1% of the stuff's made in the United States. And so I've tried to get the stores to put up a sign that's with a big flag and says ask us about our made in USA product. Because if the consumer has to work really hard just to find the ones that meet their environmental concerns, they're not going to do it. Whereas if you made it easy for them, some would do so, and the store would say, wow, we're selling a lot of that made in USA stuff. Let's get some more. So anyway,
Yep.
if there's any retailers out there, I'd love to work with you to do that.
And it is definitely a source of pride. I know it's a big initiative in the last 5 to 10 years, made in the USA, and trying to do that. It's definitely a challenge for manufacturers with a global supply chain.
Yeah.
Harry, how did we get in this position? I mean, what kind of government policies and government strategies basically came about that made us push all of this offshore other than just labor costs?
Yeah. Well, almost everything finally comes to labor cost because the companies went abroad to find a lower priced product, something they could buy there, the FOB price, the Ex Works price, something there lower than what they were getting here. And in reality, based on our data, on our user data, that FOB price on average across a broad range of industries in China is 30% lower than in the US. Okay? And that's a lot. If you're a company, that's the difference between profit and loss. And so as company after company went, and the rest of the companies followed them to get that lower priced product. And the price, I'd say 90% driven by wage, a little bit of regulation, a little bit of taxation and this and that, but the wage is the big thing. And it was, the whole thing was exacerbated by the fact that the US, instead of having an industrial policy, I say had a deindustrialization policy. We let the dollar go up 300% in the last 40 years. It's going up 11% already this year. Poor basic education, very poor recruiting and training of skilled workforce, high corporate tax rates, all kinds of problems like that. And so where the other countries were shifting their tax burden away from corporations onto their consumers, we didn't do that. And we allowed the dollar to get too high because we're the reserve currency. So the answer is to reverse those policies. Most important, a much better and larger and better trained skilled workforce, get the dollar down, much better education, don't raise corporate tax rates because companies make their decisions based on after-tax returns. A series of things that could be done like that would make a big difference.
So we've heard for a long time in manufacturing, I mean, those of us that spend time there, that people don't want to work in manufacturing anymore. Young people coming out of high school, they have choices. They can go to more education, they can go into the trades, they can go into manufacturing, but they're not attracted there. What can we do to help make manufacturing more attractive? And to some degree, we can control wages and we can attract people, but that's still market economics. You can't basically pay more than you can afford for your profitability. So what do we need to do to bring these young people that are coming out of school and bring them into manufacturing and say, these are great jobs?
So I would say there's two factors in this. One is the university versus what you would call a trade. Should I go to university and study philosophy, sociology, or should I become a tool maker? That kind of decision. And that's one point. And the other one is, should I go into manufacturing as a trade or maybe construction as a trade? Okay, so I'll deal with both of those. First, in terms of university versus trade, the country, our society is amazingly biased in favor of university. The guidance counselors push every kid to the best college they could get into rather than the best career that they can find. And so the thing that gets me most, I'm doing my best to fight. There's a chart it appears in maybe 10 or 12 forums on the education and labor websites. You've probably seen it. It has horizontal bars, and headline is education pays or $1 million more lifetime income. And here's no high school, partial college, community college, 4-year degree, master's, PhD, and income going up a number of degrees. But they never show on those charts that people who've passed an apprenticeship make an income that's essentially the same as the bachelor's degree. And so they're telling all the kids, if you want a good income, if you want a solid career, if you want to stay employed, you've got to get a degree, as opposed to telling them, here are some alternative ways where you can get just as good an economic outcome for yourself. And so first is we have to show a better balance between university and what you call the trade or STEM kind of jobs. And then the second one is manufacturing. And a lot of people that discuss this talk about the 3Ds. So people talk about dark, dirty, and dangerous in manufacturing. And I added to that 2 additional Ds, dead end and disappearing. And then I'm writing an article that replaces that with the 5 S's, like shiny, safe, spotless, surging, steady. Okay, and I'm going to get that out with data to support it, and pictures of companies that are clean and shiny, and get that out for the industry to use, to show to the kids that indeed the fears that they have, the idea they have of manufacturing the way it was 100 years ago are not true today. That manufacturing is now safer than other jobs on average. A lot of shops are amazingly clean. And that reshoring is happening, which means that the declining or disappearing aspect is gone because jobs are coming back even from China.
If you're successful in your initiatives, yes, they won't be disappearing anymore.
We are
What
successful.
and continuing so? What about what are schools needing to do, even at the high school level, to help educate the kids that are coming out and they want perhaps an opportunity in manufacturing or in the industrial sector? Clearly, we're doing things in manufacturing that's becoming more high tech. And a lot of that is attractive to those students, but are they coming out of high school and even junior college anyway that they are prepared to get into these items, to get into these careers?
Like I said, the basic education in the US is weak compared to most countries, or the most developed countries, even much not nowhere near as good as China's. And so most people would agree that the key is to have early exposure, to have kids when they're 4th grade, 5th grade, starting to learn something about manufacturing, to have shops, to have some knowledge, to take trips, to do something. And then as they get older, maybe 15, 16, to have internships, to have summer jobs at companies, to do tours and trips to see companies, to see new equipment, to see the high technology, to see all the things, the things that they do for fun on their computer, to see that someone's doing something like that on the CNC control or the programming of a machine. Say, wow, they're going to pay me to do this. This is pretty good.
I think that would be a fantastic thing for schools to do. I've got 2 that have just left the high school arena in the last couple of years, and there weren't a lot of classes that were industrial. The auto shop, the wood shop, the metalworking, those are kind of gone in most of the schools now. And I think that the education system is really there to promote the college path, right? Yeah. They're there to basically say, we're going to prep you every way we can to get into the next level of education. And I think there's a miss there.
Yeah, exactly. And, let me go back to the US dollar again. Used to be manufacturing clearly paid more than most service jobs. And now that's not true. It's not as true. The gap is smaller. And that's partially because if there's a shortage of workers and McDonald's raises wages, well, Burger King can raise wages, and Red Robin, whomever, and they're all staying about competitive. Whereas if we raise the wage too much for the manufacturing worker, then we're no longer competitive with Germany and Canada and Mexico and China and so on. So one advantage of bringing the dollar down is that we can raise the manufacturing workers' wages relative to the service worker to get the skills that we need. and yet not raise their wages relative to the Chinese or the Mexican or the German worker. Right? So there's all these pieces come together like this, and the idea is to get it to work. So one thing I want to mention, I want everybody to see my T-shirt. Manufacturing is cool, which is what we believe, and it's part of that image that we want to get across to the students so that they will volunteer to go into manufacturing.
I think it's a great collaborative strategy to bring manufacturers in, do those internships for summer students, bring them into the factories, into the manufacturing sites, and let them come for a day, see how things are going, and what, how things are made. That's an amazing opportunity, and I have concerns we just don't do a lot of that in the United States anymore. So,
But one thing that's coming up, actually, the IMTS, the International Manufacturing Technology Show, used to be the Machine Tool Show in Chicago at McCormick Place, September 12th through 17 this year. And they typically, first, the total attendance in 2018 was 130,000 people. So it's the biggest show in North America. And every year they have a student summit, and they bring in 10 to 15,000 high school and community college kids to see all the computers and all the robots and all the excitement of actually making things. So anybody who's out there that's within a distance of Chicago, talk to your high school and see if they're planning on a bus tour to see IMTS.
so is that funded for or by manufacturing companies, or is that up to the schools to fund that and bring those students to that open invitation?
Yeah, I think, and I'm not sure that the school has to pay for the bus, but that IMTS, they have a huge exhibit hall essentially devoted to the students and to showing them different kinds of certificates and training and places they can go to get community college degrees, and everything you can think of will be right there for them. So if anybody who's listening, if you're interested in this, go to the IMTS 2022 website and look up, I think it's Student Summit.
Very good. Are there companies or industries in the United States that are supporting this, pulling people out of high school and really getting them indoctrinated in manufacturing? I mean, who's inviting these students in? What industries, what companies, if you can name any, that are really proactive in this area?
Well, for the IMTS event, the local trade associations and companies go out and they motivate the schools to bring the kids in. In general, I'm very much in favor of apprenticeships. And in general, apprenticeships are happening at the company level, but typically in association with a community college. So the kid either at the age of 16 or maybe at 18 will enter the apprenticeship program, and they'll be taking maybe 2 days a week at the community college to study the theory and continue on with math and science and things like that. And the other maybe 3 days a week, they'll be doing the actual using of the equipment at the shop or the company. And like my old company, which is now GF Machining Solutions, it was always hard to find enough service engineers. So we hired people, who young men and women who then went to the community college to get training, and we trained them on service of the machines at our facility, and they've done well, becoming excellent service engineers.
Okay, well, that's a really good approach. I've worked in the technology sector of manufacturing probably most of my career. So I know there's a lot of shiny objects that are out there today: cloud, IoT, analytics, all kinds of cool stuff. There has to be some degree of enticing those students who are interested in those STEM subjects to get out and see manufacturing, not necessarily as an engineer or as a college degreed person, but even working the factory floor today is pretty high tech in some companies.
It is, and let me just nuance that a little bit. In the U.S. and in Europe, a lot of the apprentices come in and out of high school, and within 4 years they have their apprentice papers and an associate's degree from the community college, paid for typically by the company, and then in an ideal world, the company pays for them to go on and get their bachelor's degree in engineering or management or something relevant. And so it shouldn't, it isn't either this or that. It's the training as the solid foundation for the more theoretical work. So that's what we think is ideal. But in terms of what companies should be doing technologically, I always put most of the emphasis on automation, robotics, cobots, things like that, replacing their older CNC machines and again, I come out of machining, but on average, our CNC machines are maybe years older than the Germans, and the Chinese invest 2 or 3 times as much per year in equipment. The South Koreans have, I think, 3 times or 5 times as many robots per 1,000 workers as we do. So the U.S. just hasn't invested in, and I mean, the best companies do. A lot of them don't do as much as they should, and so it's necessary for companies to do more of that, and then to link and monitor those machines, to have the IoT and things, hooking everything together so you know what's happening, and so you can keep the machines running at night, because running at night now, unattended at night, now reduces the disadvantage of the higher U.S. labor costs relative to places like China. So automated quoting in the U.S., companies sometimes take days or weeks to get the quote out on the product, and if you can get it out in an hour, you're more likely to get the order. So automated quoting can be an important part of this.
You see a lot of technology changes in manufacturing, and it's global. It's often said that U.S. manufacturers are pretty conservative, and they don't invest, most of the subsectors don't invest in a lot of the new technology. Is that a hindrance right now for attracting labor and getting capabilities back from the U.S.?
Well, it's certainly a hindrance for being competitive, because the new equipment is more competitive and lets us offset the higher labor costs. I think the U.S. it's partially the failing of manufacturing, but it's partially the failing of our lack of industrial policy, because companies tend to invest dramatically more when their capacity utilization exceeds 80%, 80%. And the U.S. has spent most of its time around 75, 77%, whereas China has spent its time at 85 or 90%. So they keep pounding in and buying more equipment. See? So by reshoring, more reshoring, less offshoring, by work coming back, we're getting those companies up. So just 2 months ago, we hit the 80.5% capacity utilization. So companies are now at the point where they have the need for more capacity, and they're making the money to be able to pay for the equipment. See? So I see right now as a golden moment of opportunity for the U.S. to invest in equipment, to invest in IoT, to invest in all the things that can make us competitive. And it's essential that the government does its part to help, but also that the companies, be willing to open up their wallet and spend the money and make it happen. And I'm optimistic that things will go well.
What do you think about the situation that's basically been evolving and will continue, where we're seeing such a great, well, let's not even call it the Great Resignation. We had before that all of the baby boomers leaving the manufacturing world. What is your take on that? How is that going to impact things in the reshoring initiatives?
Yeah, so we lost a lot of skill with those baby boomers. I'm actually older than a baby boomer, so I'm part of the loss, I guess. And so that's hard, but it's not irretrievable. You can attract some of those people back. In terms of the Great Resignation, I've talked to some companies, and they say that their long-term workers, the people who have been there 3 years or more, almost none of them leave. There's this churn. There's maybe, I don't know, 5 million people in the United States that'll work here for a month and there for a month and somewhere else for a month. So you see this statistic of 30% turnover, and yet it's 95% of the people, I believe, are staying, and there's 5% of the people that are turning like this coming up with 30%. You see, so the problem is not really as bad as it appears at first. But especially for manufacturing to keep them. They got to do all the things that we talked about. And I think there's also a very important role for the U.S. opening its borders to skilled people of the type that we need for the tool makers, the welders, precision machinists, programmers, the things where we have shortages, and to get people in from all over the world to fill those roles. You know, Americans say that they don't want to do technology. Okay, we'll find somebody else who wants to come in and do it here and let them make the big bucks instead of you.
Well, so we've talked a little bit about what individuals can do, and we've talked about what companies can do to try to attract people into the industries and the verticals. What should government be doing, if anything, or what barriers maybe should they be knocking down in order to make this possible and to reshore and make investments in manufacturing such that it's the place to go to work?
Yeah, well, the things I mentioned before, I think the skilled workforce. We advocate, fix that chart so people can see apprenticeships a good solution. Offer loans, apprenticeship loans. So right now you have to pay maybe $15, $16 for an apprentice to start. And if you're training them half the time and paying their tuition at school, and you're paying a master to train them, companies believe at the end of the apprenticeship that the company lost money on the apprentice. And then General Motors or GE hires them away for $5 more an hour, and the company says, "Well, I'm never going to do that again. That was stupid." And so if you could pay them $10 an hour and they borrowed five from the government, like 10,000 a year, less than most college loans, at the end of the apprenticeship, if they stayed on with the company pays the loan off over the next 5 years. The apprentice wins, the country wins, the company wins, everybody wins. So it's things like that that we could institutionally do that would help. So skilled workforce, get the dollar down, don't raise corporate taxes, and then companies automate, train, and reshore.
And recruit at the high school and college level. I think that's really
Exactly.
important, is to let people know there are good jobs, cool jobs in manufacturing.
Exactly. Let me mention a couple of things that we do that can help with this. So we provide the TCO estimator, total cost of ownership estimator, that helps companies stop buying just on the basis of price, but instead consider all the relevant costs like freight, duty, carrying cost of inventory, the risk of stocking out because of the long supply chain, the risk of China decoupling because of something happening over Taiwan. Major considerations. So we have the TCO estimator, we have the import substitution program. So if a company's really good at making a something, whatever it is, we can tell them, we can train them on the TCO, tell them who the biggest importers are of what they make, and then they can use the TCO to convince that importer to buy from them instead of importing. And we have a program to help states fill supply chain gaps by targeting certain categories and getting foreign companies to fill those gaps. So, and I'm here. I have this mission of 5 million manufacturing jobs, and if anybody who's listening, if they've got an opportunity or a great success to report, you find us at reshorenow.org. Contact me, and love to hear from you. Love to help you.
Right, and we'll certainly leave all the contact information for Harry and for the Reshoring Initiative, the website. Are there any other resources on the website that are easily available and free to access for companies that can do some exploration?
Well, one that's I think is rather neat is the library. So we have a library, and I think it's a database that has in it articles or data about 5,000 or 6,000 companies that have done reshoring or FDI, and and under library advanced search, a company can go in and let's say they make automotive components, for example. They can say, I'm interested in transportation equipment in Kansas because that's where the factory is, and it'll come up and tell you all the companies that have reshored transportation equipment into Kansas. And then they can go to the company and say, hey, I see you're making whatever. We can make the components for that. We'll sell them to you. So we've got, again, another way to help them find some opportunities to benefit from reshoring.
Okay, very good. Well, again, we'll leave all that contact information and make sure people can access or get access to the Reshoring Initiative website and some of the capabilities that you have. Any final thoughts on where we are with manufacturing and what it's going to take to get us back to self-sufficiency? And
it's taken 50, 60 years to decline to where we are, to go from a balanced trade to the point where we import more than we produce. And it's going to take decades more to get back. But if we don't start now, it's going to get worse and worse. So the answer is we have a good start. We've proven that it's feasible. Our data shows on the TCO estimator section of the website, you can find data that shows that compared to China, about 20 to 30% of what we now import will be brought back here if the companies do the math correctly, use the TCO estimator. So we've proven that it's feasible, and it's just a question of companies doing the math, making the decision, doing the investing, and making it happen. And we're here to help them. And I appreciate Matics helping us get the message out.
excellent. Well, you're very insightful. Obviously, you have the experience and the knowledge to help this, and we appreciate the effort that you've made over the last 10 or 12 years, even before that in the industry. I thank you for your time. We'll make this available for folks to see, and again, contact information. And I wish you the best of the day. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Win every shift with Matics. Book your free demo today.